Welcome to Business Amplified with host Kevin A. Dunlap.
This podcast is for small business owners aiming to amplify their enterprises.
Explore strategies to play a bigger game by becoming an author, public speaker, podcast host, or expanding your brand in other ways.
Elevate your business on Business Amplified.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Business Amplified. This is the show that is geared to help you to expand your business by increasing your exposure so other people know who you are and what it is that you do. And today we have a gentleman by the name of Anthony Dickerson. He's coming from all the way from New Jersey. I know we talk about, Bali or Singapore or whatever, but this person is part of the United States. I love having our American entrepreneurs on our show. And this is no doubt somebody I'm definitely going to be very interested in getting to know more about. So, Anthony, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. It's really great to be here.
So, Anthony, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What is it that you do? And why is it that you do it?
Well, like you said, my name's Anthony Dickerson. I have a company called Foundations Business Consulting, and I've been in business since 2010.
Okay.
We work with businesses and nonprofits to help them elevate their operations so that they get unstuck. You know, what I saw years ago is that most CEOs or executive directors, the business, the nonprofit, it grows up to their capacity for operations. Meaning that when a CEO or an executive director has reached that capacity, the business stalls. There's a CEO I was talking with probably just 2 or 3 months ago, whose business had plateaued at one number. Their revenues had plateaued for about 3 years in a row. And he was telling me that he wants to do more sales strategy, more marketing strategy. And in listening to him and all that he's done, my conclusion was you probably have the best sales and marketing strategy on the planet by now, because he's been doing sales and marketing and increasing those for years. But the problem wound up being that their HR system was almost non-existent. Their IT system was almost non-existent. Their finance system was all awry. And all these operations areas were really in bad shape. So the business had stopped, had reached its limit. And that's what I've seen over and over and over again. So that's how Foundation comes in. We help those businesses, those nonprofits, to first understand where they are and then recommend different tools and different assessments, different audits, so that they can get unstuck.
That's the one thing I've talked about several times is when the owner of the company becomes the bottleneck in their own business, where they have to be there and they're the ones that's stopping this. So what are some of the things that you recommend in order for them to get past that glass ceiling or so-called that they're at?
Well, the first thing we do is a discovery assessment. So we figure out how they're doing in all the areas of operations. And once we can figure out how they're doing, then we can start recommending, let's say their HR is fairly poor. So we'll go in and we'll do an HR audit and really look, now we're going to go deep in the HR and see exactly what's going on. I mean, we look at every single aspect of HR so we can discover where are you strong and where are you weak and need our help. And then after we do the audit, we'll put together an action plan. And then we start working through that action plan so that we can upgrade their HR. And we do that same thing for all the different areas of operations. So every company is different. Some companies have very good systems. Some companies have very poor ones. And we look and see specifically for that company, for that organization, where they are and how we can help.
Now, does this usually mean that the owner or CEO has to start giving up some of their own physical control, like hiring other or having more different volunteers come in?
You are exactly right, Kevin. You know what we've seen is that the CEOs have a great skill set to be CEO. They're usually very sales oriented. They're usually very marketing oriented, which is why they like to focus on those areas. But as the organization grows, so I'm working with a nonprofit right now, and their executive director is very good at what we would think of as sales and marketing, and in her case, development, but very poor in operations. But the organization was small when she started. So the organization only had 3 or 4 people when she started. And she had to do everything at that point. But now the organization is about 15, 16 people. She needs to give up some of those controls. And now I'm working with someone who has skills in the operations area. She's not operations, but she's becoming an operations person now to help that executive director to take off of the executive director's plate things that frankly she's not good at and she doesn't enjoy doing, right? So it's really quite phenomenal for her because she hates doing it and she's terrible at it. And we give it to someone else who enjoys doing it and is really great at it.
And that's the thing, I guess, that you learn as you're growing your business. I'm going to mention basically 3 books. And I don't know if Anthony's read these books or not. If he has, we'll go into a deeper discussion about them. But the first book I'm going to recommend is any of the early books of the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. I mean,
Yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki is a phenomenal person. And the reason I recommend any one of those books, the Rich Dad Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, Own Your Own Corporation, or any of the other ones that he's written, is that Kiyosaki talks about there's basically every business or every person falls within, let's say, 4 quadrants.
Okay.
And what he does is he has basically a crosshairs. The top left, he has an E. In the bottom left, he has an S. In the top right, he has a B. And the bottom right is an I. Most people that are working for a living are on the left side of that equation. They're either in E, which is the employee, or they're at S, that's the self-employed. On the right-hand side is B, which is the business owner, and the bottom right is the investor. Now, the reason I recommend this book is this is going exactly where Anthony's talking about, is that most people think that they're a business owner, that they're in the B side, but they're still in the S side. They're still self-employed.
Right.
And a
Right.
self-employed person, basically, how to distinguish between a self-employed business and a business owner business is the owner of the business itself. If you can step away from your business and the business will still operate, it probably even could do better than you not being there, then you're
Right.
a business owner. But if you have to be there every single day, now you own a job. You're self-employed. And
Right.
that is a mindset shift that most people have a hard time doing. Is they have to go from the bottom left to the top right, that lateral move, or excuse me, that diagonal move in order to grow that business. That does mean being able to relinquish control. Have somebody else that enjoys what they're doing. Like, hey, I don't want to be HR anymore. I don't want to be
Right.
marketing anymore. I don't want to be any of this anymore. I hire somebody else to do it.
That's
The
right.
second book I'm going to recommend is called The 40-Hour Work Week
Mm.
by Tim Ferriss. Now, Tim Ferriss, he talks about later on in the book where you need to write down who is the manager of the HR department, who's the manager of the marketing, who's the manager of the sales, who's the manager of R&D, who's the manager of this, and you put the name of the person that. Now, if you're self-employed, your name may be going across the board, but your one of your first goals to grow your business is to take your name off that piece of paper. You're no longer the HR manager. That's Bob Smith. He's doing it. And Jane Doe, she's doing HR. And so you're taking yourself off, and that's the only way that you're going to be able to grow your business. And the third book I'm going to highly recommend is called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And Michael Gerber, in that book, and I've talked about this a couple of times on this show, is that basically every business has the technician, there's the
Mhm.
manager, and then there's the investor or the investor. I forget what he calls it. That's the one that's thinking about the future. And one of the things that he talks about, and it pissed me off the very first time I read this book. The
Yeah.
first 3 or 4, if you have to get past the first 4 chapters, if it pisses you off, you have to keep reading on because it made me very angry. And basically, because he talks about a baker, and this is the best baker out there. This baker's working for somebody else. You know what? I'm going to start my own business because I know how to. Why am I limiting myself to the salary or the hourly wage that I'm getting? And basically, what the E-Myth Revisited says, and most people just call it E-Myth, but it's technically E-Myth Revisited, is that the person that's the great that's the great employee is the technician. They're the ones that knows how to do a great baking. They know how to do all this stuff. However, for that technician to go and start their own business, because that's where their expertise is, the likelihood of their success is almost zero
Yes.
because they are the expert. That is why they will fail. And the reason is because they are. It sounds counterproductive, but the reason is they don't know how to manage. They don't know how to run a business. They know how to be a good baker, but they have to relinquish that control to grow their business. Now,
Right.
Anthony, have you heard, read, or would you recommend any of those three books
Well,
for your clients?
I've heard of all three of those books. The book that stands out the most for me, I've read two of them. I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I've read the E-Myth. The book that stands out the most to me is the E-Myth. I found the E-Myth Revisited such a good book that not only did I read it, but I gave a copy to both of my children and had them read it, and let's have a conversation about it. So that to me was the most outstanding of the three books that you mentioned.
And it sounds like your business model is kind of based on the myth stuff. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, you've got to, I know you're the expert at this, but you have to relinquish control.
Yes, yes, and you want to relinquish controls in the areas that one, you're not too good at, and two, sometimes you need to relinquish control even in areas that you are good at so you can do the things that the business needs, right? Your business
You have
dictates
to
what you
manage
need.
the people.
Yes, you have to learn how to manage, and management is difficult. And part of the things that we do at Foundations is we have a supervisor training. It's amazing, Kevin, how many supervisors have never been trained on how to be a supervisor. I've worked with supervisors who have an employee that's disgruntled or an employee who's not being effective. And I've heard supervisors have told me, well, that's not my job to handle that. That's their job to get themselves together. And I say, no, 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 it is actually your job, but they don't know. So we have to go through a supervisor training that I have a short one that's a day, but I have a longer one that is about 6 sessions, an hour and a half each session, because I found that so many people in the supervisory position don't know what the job entails. And that's really critical for every business to have supervisors, including the executive director or the CEO, who actually knows how to manage people instead of just assigning work, which is what many do. Or some don't even assign work. Some say, I work with one CEO who says that my employees should be self-motivated. Well, that's great, and they should be self-motivated, but they need direction. They need to know where we're going as an organization. They need your support as the CEO. But so many don't get that.
Well, the thing is, I mean, one of the things I learned a long time ago is that if you really want to work with your employees, is one of the things that you need to share with them is why are you doing this? Why are they doing what they're doing? Because
Right.
if the employee's like, I'm doing this so that this part of the machinery is going to work at that level, that means the other part of the machinery that interacts with it is this going to do this. But if you just say, hey, go do this assignment, like, but why? No, if they understand the why, that employee could be a lot more self-motivated because now they're on board with what the organization, I would call it, the ship is doing. As the ship
Right.
is going through the water, all the little pieces have to work together.
Right. And as you're talking about the why, we've read Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why, right? And
Yes.
that's not only when you're trying to market your business to outside organizations, but it's also within the business that the people in the organization need to know what's happening. It's unusual nowadays, but shouldn't be, to even have meetings for the different departments, so the different department heads know what's going on. It's I find it embarrassing when one department head is having a substantial effort in their department and no one else in the organization knows about it, right? So everybody should know, everyone in the organization should know about the substantial things going on within the organization, but so many don't. So we want to start with why, let people know why we're doing this as an organization and why you're doing this at your job. Because if it is I work with one organization, they do a lot of manufacturing. And when someone is absent that day, it slows down the manufacturing for the entire organization, right? If something has to be cut, then it has to be painted, then it has to be put together, then it has to be tested. If the painter's out, well, production stops, right? We need everyone here every day in order to have the products that we need.
The thing is, people do get sick. People do take vacations. People do,
They do.
so there has to be somebody that could fill in for that painter, maybe the apprentice or whatever.
Right.
They take over for that. It's like the backup quarterback. I mean, when you're playing a football game and you're up by 45 points and you're in the fourth quarter with 5 minutes left to go, you don't play with your 8 players anymore. You don't want them to get hurt. So you have to have backups to be able that are being trained to take over for those times or those days when those critical people have to step away for a day or two or a week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we want people to, I think in this organization, one of the issues were people were just taking off randomly. And yes, you have backups, but it's best to be able to plan. But in order to plan, to your point, people have to know why their jobs are important. I need to
Yes.
call in because my job is critical. So I don't want to just not show up because there may be backups, but this backup works over in this area. So now we have to get someone to cover this area while this person goes over here. But to know why, to your point, is very, very critical so that people all understand that we're a team.
Absolutely, because otherwise they just feel like they're just another cog in the wheel. They're
Right.
just
Right.
another piece of machinery that's being taken advantage of, and they're just going to their 9 to 5 job,
Right.
turning whatever wrench that they're turning, and then they're going home. But if they have a why, then they have a purpose. Like, okay, I'm part of the bigger plan.
Yes. Yes. And that's very critical. Uh, So it's exciting to work with these business owners who are discovering this, right? They see their limitations, maybe sometimes for the first time. They promote others, usually within the organization. Very rarely do we have to hire someone to work on the operation side, right? There's usually someone within the organization who's excited about this, probably who has been complaining about this for some time, but perhaps they didn't have the skill set. They just knew something was wrong. And now we come in as foundations, we do the audits. We also train that person so that they can now take over operations and the organization thrives. I mean, it's I work with so many organizations that have gone from $3 million to $6 million, that have gone from $4 million to $3 million, that have gone from $2 million to $4 million, and some that have gone from $25 million to $30 million, from $30 million to $40 million. So it makes a big difference when the operations are right and when people are involved and when people are excited about what they're doing.
Right, and then being willing to expand, be willing to start bringing on new employees. Just to
Yes.
because as you expand, then you need to bring on other. This is called other cogs to this bigger wheel, and that means number one, you may be relinquishing control, or you may have some of your presidents or your VPs. Now they're duplicating themselves so that the business can grow.
That's right. That's right. That's very critical that we hire well, we hire the right people, we hire people so that, yes, so that the business can grow. Um, in my book, Unstuck and Unstoppable, we I talk about many of the clients that I've worked with and some of the ways that Foundations has helped them over time. But one of uh, there's a part one and a part two. In the part one, we talk about how critical it is for leaders of the organization to understand their role, to understand their limitations, and to invite people to come in, but give them the ability to come in and do their role well. Sometimes the leaders of the organization, because they're not good at operations, sometimes they think no one is, right? And they think, well, if I'm not good at it, no one's good at it. No one, this problem can't be solved. But indeed it can be solved, but they have to, as you say, they have to step back and they have to allow others to come in and to shine in the areas where they're good at, where they excel at,
Now,
where they,
now, how does a person like that, because maybe they have there's a pride thing and they don't want to acknowledge their limitations, and how do you have them say, hey, it's okay to have limitations, have somebody else come in. It is not it's not something that's going to shame you, but we're wanting to build this business and be more effective. How do you get past any kind of pride issues that a lot of people may suffer from?
well, that's interesting that you say that. There's two areas that hold businesses back. One is ego, which we can also say is pride, right? And the other is blind spots. So when an organization leadership has ego, where they know everything, that's going to hold the organization back. And the other area is when they have blind spots, when they don't even they can't even see what they don't know because it's a blind spot. That's going to hold an organization back. And until the organization leadership deals with their ego and deals with their blind spots, then the organization's going to be held back. So when foundation starts working with a client, we certainly go over that, but we usually have something that's even more obvious to them, and that's the fact that you're not growing, you're stuck. You've been doing this for 2 or 3 years, and you've been stuck at this revenue. You've been stuck at this employee count. You've been stuck at this level of business with these organizations. So obviously something has to change. And the other thing that really helps us is when we help the leaders to understand what their strengths are and to say, you know what, here's what the end of this is going to look like. It's going to look like you doing these areas that you enjoy and not doing the areas that you can't stand doing. The areas that you're weaker in, you probably don't enjoy doing them so well. So we often with leaders, I'll do the DISC assessment. I really like the DISC assessment out of all the assessments because it really does a great job of pointing out different work habits and situations. But when I go over the DISC with them, they understand, oh, yes, these are my strengths. These are the areas that I enjoy doing. So I say, well, why not give up those areas that you don't enjoy doing and you're not good at? And through some conversations with all of those elements, then the CEO, the executive director begins to soften some and say, yes, you know what? It would be good. Yes, they say things like, yes, you're right. I would enjoy if I didn't have to do operations because yes, it's true. I'm not that good at it. So we have to get them to the point where they see and they admit and they submit to the fact that they're not good at this stuff and they don't enjoy doing it. So why not give it to this person who is really great at it and who really enjoys it?
And for those of you that don't know what the DISC assessment is, it's what I learned it through another word or another word. It's called the behavioral matrix. Could you tell the listeners and the viewers what the DISC assessment is and what the DIS and C stand for?
Yes, so the DISC, as you say, is the D, the I, the S, and the C. Normally, now this is not all the time, but I'd say more often than not, most of us are two of those letters. Now, I do know some people that is only one letter, and I know some people that are 3 letters. But most of the time, people are 2 letters. D is the dominant. D is usually those people who we picture as leading a large organization. They're dominant, they're forceful, they're quick to speak, they have a lot on their mind, they're they're dominant. So we understand that. The I is generally for, I don't even know what the I stands for exactly, but
Perspective, I think.
it's the I is generally those people though who people like them. They like people. It's people person. When I think of an I, if you think of someone who's a straight I, they're the life of the party. If they're an extrovert as well, they're the life of the party. People love them. They love when they come around. They're easy to talk to. Uh, the S
They're your
is
salespeople.
yeah. They would be a lot of salespeople, but not salespeople that people like, right? Salespeople that people want to be around. That type, not the salespeople that people think of that they are afraid of and want to run from. The people who are S is really for people who like systems. It's there are some of us who, for instance, when I led operations at one organizations, I had a young lady there who did payroll, and she was a S. She may have been just an S because she loved doing payroll because payroll was the same thing every week. Every week she could do the same thing and put the same numbers, and that sort of system, that sort of process she loved doing. So S's are people who love doing systems, who love having processes, who love to do the same thing, do it the same way. They love to make lists. They love to check off that list, check off boxes on that list when things get done, and they work very systematically. And the C is, I think it's for maybe conscientious, but it's a C is really for those people who uh, love to analyze, right? There's some of us who love analyzing. We love doing research. We love finding out the answers to difficult problems. So depending on what your combination is of D, I, S, and C, that tells a lot about who you are, how you operate at work. So DIs, for instance, the DIs who are CEOs, and I deal with a lot of DIs. They're dominant, but they're also nice people, right? It's very interesting because their relationship with you is very important. So they may lead the organization even in a dominant way, but they're very concerned about relationship. Whereas I work with some people who are DCs who lead organizations, and they're dominant and they're researching, and those people, they really are strong at knowing exactly what the business needs in many areas. They know what the business needs, but they may not be as friendly as the DI, right? The DC is not quite as friendly as a DI. And often what's needed in an organization, so with let's take the DI. So there was a DI and a CEO who was a DI in one organization I work with, and she had someone on her team who loved operations who was an SC. And over the years of using the disc and really working with a lot of people with the disc, I've seen that when a DI CEO works with an SC COO, magic seems to happen, right? The DI, all the areas that the DI is weaker in, the SC is much stronger in, and vice versa. The areas the SC is weaker in, the DI is much stronger in. And when they find a way to work together, then the DI this DI was trying to do budgets, and it would take her weeks to figure anything out, where the SC came and in about 5 minutes they had it all straightened out, right? Because the SC is better at doing things like budgets, and the DI is better at doing things like sales and marketing. And that combination worked really well for that organization, and they grew. I'd say within about a year of me working with them, their revenue grew from 3 million to about 6 million. They went from about 15 staff members to about 30 staff members in their organization. So, but that's the sort of thing that can happen if you allow people with the right skill set to come in and do the job that maybe you can't do as a CEO.
And that's really good to know, because being a D, an I, an S, or a C, or a combination of two or even three of them, is not like one is better than the other. Because everyone has their strengths, and they also have weaknesses. And the
Right.
thing is, by having other people to take over for where your weakness may be, regardless
Right.
if you will admit to it or not, let's say
Right.
you do admit to it, is going to
Right.
make the organization a much more effective team. Because it's
Much
not about
more.
the ego, it's not about the lone person, it's not about the CEO, it's about the whole organization. That's why I like to equate it to what Anthony's saying, that I like to running a ship. When your
Yeah.
ship is at sea, all the systems, let's say a luxury liner is at sea. The main focus are going to be the passengers that are the paying guests. Now
Yes.
that passenger or that person that's working in the kitchen has no idea what's going on in the engine room, but that engine room is very important for the ship to go through the water. And then the engineer has no idea what's going on in the kitchen, but for them to have the guests that
Right.
have the best experience, yes, they're focusing on their part,
Right.
but they know that the kitchen is doing their part. And the thing is, that's how you have that cohesive team.
Yes, that's great, Kevin. That's great. And yes, in a business, yes, you may not know exactly what other people are doing, and you may not be able to do what other people are doing. But if they're allowed to do their job well, because we all we all have the same goal. I was talking with a CEO friend of mine who uh, uh, probably about 2 months ago, and I mentioned to him, I said, you're not the only one in the organization that wants to see the organization thrive. Everyone in the organization wants to see the organization thrive because everyone has hopes that when the organization thrives, they too will benefit somehow. So everyone wants the organization to do well. Uh, but in his mind, at that point, he was the one who needed to make all of the important decisions. But not so. Not so. There's people who are more qualified to make some of those decisions than you are, who also
Right.
want to see the organization thrive. And sometimes you have to step back and trust them and trust what they say, because they can help the organization thrive in this area even better than you can.
Exactly, and I don't know why I'm on this whole boat analogy, but let's say you're starting you're going to start your boating business. You're going to have run a sailboat. You're going to have two people come out, husband and wife on board. You're going to be sailing the boat. You're going to be making the dinners. You're going to be cleaning the rooms. You're going to be doing whatever laundry. But then you advance to the point where, okay, now you're on a boat that has two employees, and one is a boatswain, and another one is the one that's controlling the sails. So not so you're giving up some of that control. Eventually,
Right.
you become the captain of a luxury liner, and you had to give up all these controls. You're no longer the cook. You're no longer the boatswain. You're no longer the engineer. You're just now the one in charge of the ship. And
Right.
even as the captain of the boat, you have a co-captain that's going to run the boat when you are sleeping, when you're away, when you're,
Right.
so as your boating business grows, you have to start relinquishing control over those different departments. And
That's right.
I don't know why that visual just came to me, but that's the visual that came to me when you're talking about your business there.
Well, no, I think that's great. I think it's a great analogy, and I think it's one that people can understand quickly. So I think that's great. It is like that you have to let go, and if you don't let go, then your business stays stuck. And the organizations that foundations work with, one thing that I've noticed over our 14 years is that they're all stuck. And it's often not until you're stuck do you go out and seek help, right? It's often not until you've had the same revenue for 3 years in a row that you go out and say, you know what, I got to get some help. Obviously, I don't know the answer, so I've got to go and find the answer. And that's one reason we wrote our latest book, Unstuck and Unstoppable, because we talked about part one, which is helping the CEO, executive director, understand their role. But part two, we go into some detail about every area of operations and what are some fundamental things that you can do. We call our company Foundations because we think that we want to help organizations with foundational principles. these are the foundational operational principles that you need to know in order to get your business, get your organization moving in the right direction. Some of it is very low-hanging fruit, but you'd be surprised how much low-hanging fruit people don't pick, right? That they're not aware of. So some of it is higher level learning, but we wrote the book because we said, we're out there helping organizations, but we can't help every organization. And we want every organization to be able to grow and to be able to get better and be able to understand and how to do that exactly. So once the mindset is right, then we can start working on the actual operations. So that's why we have part 1 and part 2 of that book. So we can concentrate on the mindset first, because you got to get that right. And then we can concentrate on what are the actual practical things that you can do now within your organization so that you can go from basically from stuck to unstoppable.
And that's, I'm glad you said kind of what you did was because every person that, like they said, that they hit that ceiling is, and the reason they hit that ceiling is because there is something that they don't know that they don't know, or they may know that they don't know something, but they still don't know that even ask the right questions.
Right.
And to go with what you're saying is that wherever you hit whatever that stopping point or that capital point or glass ceiling point is, that there's something that you need to learn. And the fact that if you're open to say, hey, I'm willing to listen to somebody that's been there, that does this, like somebody like Anthony himself, then as just do a consultation. Like, okay, why am I not getting any results better? And Anthony may say, from the bird's eye view, like, it's obvious. This is blah. You go,
Right.
I never even thought about it. Like, okay.
Yes. Yes. And that happens all the time, Kevin. People haven't thought about it. Like I said, the one CEO I worked with who was telling me he needs to do more marketing and sales training. And in talking to him, he does marketing and sales training every few months. So I said that's probably not it, right? You have the best marketing and sales departments in the world, but you're still not growing. You're still stuck. So let's look outside of marketing and sales and see what else it might be.
For your book, where can the listener or the viewer find your book?
Well, they can find our book everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere great books are sold. You can contact me directly at Foundations, www.foundationsbc.com, stands for Foundations Business Consulting.com. So Foundations
Again, that's
BC.
foundationsbc.com. Now, besides your website, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that? Is it through your website? Do you have a landing page? Do you have a calendar page or something along those lines?
Yeah, certainly. If you go on the website, you can schedule an appointment with me. My calendar is on my website, and you can schedule an appointment with me, or you can just drop a line to me on LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn is really the main social media that we do. That's where all of our clients are on LinkedIn, so that's where we're at, and we try and stay active on LinkedIn. So you can go on the webpage, you can go on LinkedIn. I'm very reachable, and we'll get back to you right away.
Going to LinkedIn, his name is Anthony Dickerson. So you want to search for Anthony Dickerson, and I'm assuming your Foundations BC is part of your profile.
Yes, and we have it has its own page as well. So Foundations Business Consulting has its own LinkedIn page as well, so they can reach us that way too.
And now, for all the people that's stay tuned on this show, what would be like one of the biggest pieces of advice that you would give to them, that they could take into their life today, that they can start incorporating into their business today?
Well, again, as I said, with Unstuck and Unstoppable, we have part 1 and part 2. So I'm going to stick with part 1, and I'm going to say the 2 areas that hold businesses back tend to be ego and blind spots. So if I could give just one piece of advice, I would tell business leaders, CEOs, COOs, executive directors, those who lead organizations, that we have to be aware and conscious of our ego and of our blind spots. And if we can get over ourselves with our ego, and we can actually understand that there's a lot that each of us don't know, and others could come in and help us with, then that is the beginning of growing your organization just substantially, just beyond what you thought it could be, by doing those two areas, concentrating on those two areas.
Well, Anthony, I want to say thank you very much for being on the show today. This has been very, very helpful. I think that the viewer and the listeners could start learning a lot from that, and and to also just to even acknowledge that sometimes it is your ego that does stop you from. So basically, I'm going to interpret what he said. So just get out of your own way. Just stop. Just get out of your own way.
Right.
And that's the only, and be willing to do that. That's how you're going to be able to grow your business.
Yes. Yes, this has been great, Kevin. Thank you so much. I had such a great time chatting with you and talking to your listeners. And I certainly hope that everybody grows their business from what they're learning on this podcast. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Anthony. And for those out there, until next time, be amazing.
Thanks for tuning in to another empowering episode of Business Amplified with Kevin A. Dunlap.
If you found value in today's insights, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast.
Keep amplifying your business. And remember, your success journey is our inspiration.
Until next time on Business Amplified, go out there and make your business thrive.